On December 17, 1935, exactly 32 years after the Wright brothers first flew at Kitty Hawk, a new airplane lifted off from a runway in California and quietly changed the future of the world. It did not look like a revolution. It did not break the sound barrier. It did not carry hundreds of passengers. It did not have jet engines, television screens, or a glamorous upper deck. It was a silver twin-engine aircraft with a rounded nose, a low wing, retractable landing gear, and room for just over 20 passengers. Its name was the Douglas DC-3. At first glance, it looked like just another airplane from the 1930s. But it was not. Before the DC-3, commercial aviation was fragile, uncomfortable, unreliable, and often unprofitable. Airlines survived on government mail contracts. Passengers were almost an afterthought. Flying was expensive, noisy, dangerous, and still seen by many people as something for the rich, the brave, or the desperate. After the DC-3, everything changed. Airlines could finally make money carrying passengers. Cities became connected by regular air routes. Overnight travel became possible. Business moved faster. Mail moved faster. Armies moved faster. The world began to shrink decades before the jet age arrived. The DC-3 did not just improve aviation, it made modern aviation possible. But the story of the DC-3 does not start with an airplane. It starts with a problem. In the early 1930s, air travel in America was growing, but it was still deeply limited. Most passenger aircraft were small, uncomfortable, and inefficient. Flying long distances meant stopping again and again. Cabins were cramped. Engines were loud. Heating was poor. Turbulence was frightening. Many aircraft still looked closer to flying buses than modern airliners. Airlines wanted to sell tickets, but passengers were not enough to keep them alive. The real money was in mail. This is the part of early aviation that most people forget. The first airlines were not built around vacationers. They were built around envelopes. Government airmail contracts kept airlines alive. Planes flew because mail had to move quickly across the country. Passengers were useful, but they were not the foundation of the business. If an airline lost its mail contract, it could collapse. That meant commercial aviation was not yet truly commercial. It was dependent on the government. The airplane had not yet become a profitable mass transport machine. Then came the pressure to build something better. Airlines needed an aircraft that could carry more passengers, fly faster, operate reliably, and make money without depending entirely on mail. This was not easy. Airplanes were still young technology. Engines failed. Navigation was primitive. Weather forecasting was limited. Airports were basic. Many routes were dangerous. And yet the demand was there. America was becoming a country of long distances and fast business. Railroads still dominated long-distance travel, but rail travel took time. A trip across the country could take days. The airplane promised something radical: speed. One airline understood this better than almost anyone else. Transcontinental and Western Air, better known as TWA, wanted a modern airliner that could compete with the best aircraft in the world. Its rival, United Airlines, had access to Boeing's new aircraft, and TWA needed an answer. So TWA pushed Douglas Aircraft Company to create something larger, faster, and more comfortable. Douglas responded with the DC-1, then the DC-2. These aircraft were impressive. They were metal, modern, and efficient. But one airline wanted more. American Airlines had a different problem. Its president, C.R. Smith, wanted an aircraft that could carry sleeping passengers overnight. At the time, long-distance travel often happened by train, and Pullman sleeping cars were a symbol of comfort. Smith imagined something similar in the sky: a flying sleeper, an airplane that could carry passengers across long distances while they slept. That idea led to the Douglas Sleeper Transport, or DST, and from that sleeper aircraft came the DC-3. This seems like a small change. It was not. By widening the cabin, strengthening the aircraft, improving the design, and increasing passenger capacity, Douglas created something far more important than a sleeper plane. It created the first airliner that could make passenger service profitable on its own. That was the breakthrough. The DC-3 could carry enough people, far enough, fast enough, and reliably enough to change the economics of flight. It did not just fly well, it made money. And in commercial aviation, that is what turns a machine into a revolution. When the DC-3 entered service in 1936, passengers stepped into a new era. The cabin was wider and more comfortable than earlier airliners. The aircraft could carry about 21 passengers in daytime service, or fewer passengers in sleeper configuration. It had two powerful radial engines. It flew at speeds that made older aircraft feel outdated. It could cross the United States with fewer stops than before. It was strong, dependable, and efficient. For the first time, airlines could look at a passenger aircraft and see a real business model. Before the DC-3, many airlines needed mail revenue to survive. After the DC-3, passenger revenue could become the center of the business. This changed everything. Airlines no longer had to treat passengers as extra cargo. They could build schedules around them. They could advertise comfort, speed, and reliability. They could convince business travelers that flying was worth the price. They could begin turning aviation from a daring novelty into a normal form of transportation. The DC-3 arrived at exactly the right moment. America was recovering from the Great Depression. Business leaders wanted speed. Newspapers wanted faster distribution. Politicians wanted connection. Wealthy travelers wanted modernity. And ordinary people were beginning to look at airplanes not just with fear, but with curiosity. The DC-3 gave airlines something they had never truly had before: credibility. It was the airplane that made flying feel practical. But the DC-3 did more than carry passengers. It changed the map. Routes that once seemed difficult became manageable. Cities that had depended on trains could now be connected by regular air service. New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Dallas, Atlanta, San Francisco, and dozens of other cities became part of a growing aerial network. Timetables became more reliable. Flights became more frequent. The idea of crossing huge distances in a single day became less absurd. The DC-3 helped turn air routes into infrastructure. That is what makes this airplane so important. Infrastructure is not always roads, bridges, and railways. Sometimes it is a machine repeated hundreds of times, flying the same routes, carrying the same types of cargo, passengers, and mail, until people begin to trust the system. The DC-3 was not just an aircraft. It was the unit from which modern air networks were built. And then came war. In 1939, World War II began in Europe. By 1941, the United States was pulled into the conflict. Suddenly, the same qualities that made the DC-3 perfect for airlines made it priceless for armies. It was strong. It was reliable. It could operate from rough airfields. It could carry people and cargo. It could be repaired in difficult conditions. It could fly again and again and again. The civilian airliner became a military workhorse. The military version was known as the C-47 Skytrain. To the British and Commonwealth forces, it became the Dakota. And during World War II, it became one of the most important aircraft on Earth. It did not have the glamour of a fighter plane. It did not have the destructive power of a bomber. It did not appear in propaganda posters the same way Spitfires, Mustangs or flying fortresses did. But modern war does not run on heroics alone. It runs on logistics: food, fuel, ammunition, medicine, radios, spare parts, paratroopers, evacuation, movement, and the C-47 moved the war. This is the part of aviation history that most people underestimate. The aircraft that wins a war is not always the one that shoots down the most enemies, and sometimes it is the one that brings fuel to the front, evacuates the wounded, drops paratroopers behind enemy lines, and delivers supplies when roads and railways fail. The C-47 did all of that. It flew in North Africa. It flew in Europe. It flew in the Pacific. It flew over mountains, deserts, oceans, jungles, and battlefields. It towed gliders. It dropped supplies. It carried wounded soldiers away from combat. It transported commanders, mechanics, nurses, and equipment. It flew routes where weather, terrain, and enemy fire made every journey dangerous. It became the airplane that was always needed, everywhere. On June 6, 1944, during the D-Day invasion of Normandy, C-47s filled the night sky over France. They carried paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions toward occupied Europe. Inside the aircraft, men sat in darkness with heavy equipment strapped to their bodies, or waiting for the green light. Below them were German defenses, flooded fields, hedgerows, and uncertainty. When the doors opened, thousands of paratroopers jumped into history. The C-47 did not storm the beaches, but it helped open the invasion, and that was only one night. Across the war, C-47s became essential to Allied mobility. In the China-Burma-India theatre, they flew over the Himalayas on one of the most dangerous air routes in the world. Pilots called it flying the hump. The mountains were enormous. The weather was brutal. Navigation was difficult. Aircraft iced over. Engines struggled and crashes were common. But supplies had to reach China, and the C-47 was one of the aircraft that helped make that possible. It carried the weight of geography on its wings. By the end of World War II, thousands of DC-3 and C-47 aircraft had been built. The war had turned the airplane from a commercial breakthrough into a global machine. And when the war ended, the world was suddenly full of them. Military aircraft were sold as surplus. Pilots who had flown in war returned to civilian life. Mechanics knew how to maintain them. Airports and airfields had multiplied. The aviation world had been transformed, and the DC-3 was everywhere. This is where the DC-3 changed history again. After the war, surplus C-47s became the backbone of airlines around the world. Some were converted back into passenger aircraft. Others carried cargo. Some served remote regions. Some flew for small airlines that could never have afforded brand new aircraft. Suddenly, countries that had little aviation infrastructure could build air services with tough, affordable, proven airplanes. The DC-3 democratized aviation, not just for passengers, but for airlines themselves. In Latin America, Africa, Asia, Australia, Europe, and North America, DC-3s connected cities, towns, islands, mining camps, farms, missions, military bases, and remote settlements. They landed on dirt strips, grass fields, gravel runways, jungle clearings, frozen lakes, and mountain airstrips. They carried passengers, mail, newspapers, medicine, livestock, gold, tools, soldiers, missionaries, politicians, and sometimes anything that could fit through the door. The DC-3 was not delicate. That was its genius. Many aircraft are built for ideal conditions. The DC-3 became legendary because it could survive imperfect ones. It could operate where the world was rough, It could fly in places that did not yet have modern airports. It could be repaired with basic tools by people who understood its systems. It was forgiving to fly, strong enough to endure abuse, and useful in ways its designers could never have fully imagined. Some airplanes are famous because they were advanced. The DC-3 became famous because it kept working. This is why pilots loved it. The DC-3 had character. It was not automated. It demanded skill. Pilots had to understand engines, weather, weight, trim, and feel. They flew it with hands, ears, eyes, and instinct. The airplane talked to them through vibration, sound, and pressure. It was a machine from an age when flying still felt physical. But if treated well, it gave back loyalty. It brought crews home from places where newer aircraft might not have survived. And passengers remembered it too. They remembered the sound of the radial engines, the tail-low stance on the ground, the climb into the cabin, the smell of oil, leather, metal, and fuel, the feeling of sitting inside a machine that seemed both old-fashioned and unstoppable. For millions of people, the first flight of their lives was in a DC-3. The first time they saw their town from above. The first time they crossed a mountain range, an ocean channel, or a national border by air. The DC-3 turned flight from spectacle into experience. But behind the romance was a deeper shift. The DC-3 helped create expectations we now take for granted. Scheduled flights, passenger comfort, airline profitability, air cargo networks, regional aviation, military airlift, overnight travel, reliable air service between cities. It created habits before the jet age made them global. It taught the world to think in air routes. Before the DC-3, aviation was still proving itself. After the DC-3, aviation became a system. That is the difference. A stunt can amaze people. A machine can impress people. But a system changes how society works. The DC-3 helped create that system. Then came the jet age. In the 1950s and 1960s, new aircraft began to replace propeller airliners on major routes. Jet aircraft flew higher, faster, and farther. The de Havilland Comet, Boeing 707, Douglas DC-8, and later many others made the DC-3 look old. Suddenly, passengers wanted speed and pressurized cabins. Airlines wanted larger aircraft with more range. The DC-3 was no longer the future of major airline travel, but it refused to disappear. This is one of the strangest parts of the DC-3 story. Most revolutionary machines become obsolete quickly. They change the world, and then the world moves on. But the DC-3 stayed. It moved from major airlines to regional routes, from glamorous passenger service to cargo work, from big cities to remote places, from frontline aviation to the edges of the map. And in those places, it remained useful for decades. Even as jets crossed oceans, DC-3s kept flying mail to small towns. They carried cargo into mining regions. They served islands where runways were short. They hauled supplies across jungles. They carried scientists, surveyors, firefighters, and humanitarian workers. In some parts of the world, the DC-3 was not history. It was Tuesday morning's flight. That longevity became part of the legend. Aircraft built in the 1930s and 1940s were still flying commercially generations later. Some were upgraded with modern avionics. Some received turboprop engines. Some were restored for heritage flights. Some continued working in cargo roles. The airplane outlived airlines, governments, wars, and entire generations of technology. It became less like a product and more like a species. Think about that. A machine designed before World War II, before television became common, before computers, before satellites, before jet travel, before the modern airport, remained useful into the age of the internet. That does not happen by accident. It happens when a design is so balanced, so practical, and so durable that time struggles to kill it. The DC-3's impact can be measured in aircraft built, passengers carried, miles flown, and years of service. But its real legacy is larger than numbers. It changed what people believed aviation could be. It proved that airlines could make money with passengers. It proved that air routes could become dependable. It proved that airplanes could connect not just capitals and wealthy travelers, but ordinary cities and remote places. It proved that aviation could be infrastructure. And like every machine that changes the world, its legacy is complicated. The DC-3 made travel faster and more connected. It carried medicine, mail, food, refugees, and hope. It helped build airlines and unite distant communities. But it also served war. It dropped soldiers into combat. It supported military campaigns. It moved empires, armies, and governments. It helped extend the reach of power into places that had once been protected by distance. That is the contradiction of aviation. The same airplane that carries a child to see family can carry soldiers to war. The same route that delivers medicine can deliver control. The same machine that connects people can also make conquest easier. The DC-3 was not good or evil. It was powerful. And powerful machines are always used by the world as it is, not only as we wish it to be. Today, the DC-3 occupies a rare place in history. It is both antique and alive. You can see it in museums, polished and preserved, standing as a symbol of aviation's golden age. But you can also still find examples flying, their engines rumbling, their wings lifting a design from the 1930s into modern skies. Very few machines earn that kind of afterlife. Modern passengers may never fly on a DC-3. They may board jets with glass cockpits, Wi-Fi, pressurized cabins, quiet engines, and hundreds of seats. They may move through airports filled with screens, scanners, lounges, and boarding groups. But beneath all of that is a world the DC-3 helped create. The idea that flights run on schedules, that airlines exist to carry passengers, not just mail, that cities can be connected by air as naturally as by road or rail, that distance can be measured in hours instead of days. Every modern airliner owes something to the DC-3, not because it was the fastest. It was not. Not because it was the largest. It was not. Not because it was the most advanced aircraft ever built. It was not. Its greatness was simpler and deeper. It was the right airplane at the right time, built so well that it changed the economics, habits, and expectations of flight. The DC-3 did not make aviation glamorous. Aviation was already glamorous. It made aviation practical. And practicality changes the world more permanently than glamour ever does. Glamour fades. Systems remain. A silver aircraft that began as a solution to airline economics became a passenger airliner, a sleeper plane, a military transport, a paratroop carrier, a cargo hauler, a rescue aircraft, a regional workhorse, and a flying legend. It carried businessmen and soldiers. It carried mail and medicine. It crossed mountains and oceans. It survived war and peace. It served rich cities and forgotten airstrips. It created airlines, supported armies, connected communities, and refused to die. The next time you board a plane and expect it to leave on schedule, cross a continent, and bring you somewhere that once felt far away, you are living in a world the DC-3 helped build. The jet may be modern, the airport may be digital, the route may be global, but the idea behind it, reliable passenger aviation, as a normal part of life, was proven by a twin-engine airplane from the 1930s. The Douglas DC-3 was not just an airplane. It was the moment aviation grew up. It turned flying from a risky experiment into a business. It turned airlines from mail carriers into passenger networks. It turned distance into something that could be scheduled. And long before the jumbo jet made the world smaller, the DC-3 taught the world that the sky could belong to everyone. It was the airplane that carried modern aviation out of its childhood, and nearly a century later, its shadow is still on every runway.